907 words within the 900 plus or minus 5% target. Here's the finished script. For 90 years, the official record said a German athlete named Dora Ratjen finished fourth in the women's high jump at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, a quiet footnote in a stacked field. But German sports officials made sure you'd never learn what they did to make that footnote possible. That's the story they tell. It isn't what happened. Someone made sure you'd never hear this. Here's what the records were rewritten to hide. Berlin, 1936. The Olympics Hitler wanted as a showcase of German supremacy. Every medal was propaganda. Every event was a scoreboard for a regime desperate to prove a point to the world. Dora Ratjen was 17, a promising jumper from Bremen, cleared to compete in the women's high jump by the German Athletics Federation. Officials in Berlin had one job that summer: deliver medals, deliver spectacle, deliver proof. Ratjen finished fourth. Respectable. Forgettable. Nothing that made headlines outside the sports pages. The gold went to a Hungarian jumper named Ibelia Cisak. Nobody in that stadium had any reason to think the story wasn't over. It wasn't close to over. 2 years later, in 1938, Dora Ratjen was riding a train to a competition in Vienna. Fellow passengers reported the young athlete to police, insisting something didn't add up. German authorities opened an investigation, quiet, controlled, kept out of the press as long as they could manage it. A medical examination followed. It found that Ratjen had ambiguous physical characteristics, not the tidy, binary body the record books assumed of every woman on that runway. Officials didn't call it a mystery. They called it fraud, and they called it fast. Within weeks, the Federation stripped the fourth-place finish, erased the name from the results, and closed the file. No public trial. No public explanation. Just a name lifted out of a results sheet like it had never been typed in. The official story afterward was simple, almost bored. A mistake had been made, a man had competed as a woman, the record was corrected. Case closed. But that phrase, "a mistake had been made," is where the first crack shows. Ratjen never asked to be part of any mistake at all. The convenient version says a young man deceived the German team to steal a woman's spot. That version traveled fast because it was easy, and because it blamed the athlete instead of the federation. But records uncovered decades later tell a different story. Ratjen was raised as a girl from early childhood, examined and classified by doctors long before any Olympics were mentioned, with no legal standing to challenge paperwork issued by the state. There was no elaborate plot. There was a 17-year-old handed a decision made entirely by adults in uniforms. The lie, if there was one, didn't start on a runway. It started in a doctor's office years earlier without Ratjen's consent. But that's not the part they buried. Here's the part they buried. German sports officials weren't blindsided by an intersex athlete slipping through a broken system. Later research, recovered files, interviews conducted decades afterward, points to something closer to deliberate use. Nazi Germany's athletics program treated medal counts as proof of racial and national superiority. Officials pushed borderline cases into competition when it served that goal, and quietly buried the paperwork when it didn't. Ratjen wasn't the only one. Historians have since documented other Olympic-era athletes across more than one country whose sex was misclassified, ignored, or managed by officials, almost never with the athlete's informed consent. What made Ratjen's case different is what happened after exposure. The Federation didn't protect the athlete they had put in that position. They didn't investigate their own doctors. They erased the result, closed the file, and let the public believe a teenager had personally run a con on the entire Olympic movement. When journalists finally tracked down family members decades later, they found someone who lived out a quiet life under the name Heinrich, away from sport, away from cameras, never once given a public chance to explain what actually happened inside that examination room in 1938. The Federation moved on. The gold medal stood. The fourth-place finish simply stopped existing, like it had been a rumor instead of a real 17-year-old body on a real runway. This isn't a story about someone cheating at sports. It's a story about a governing body that used a child's body to chase medals, then discarded that child the moment the arrangement became inconvenient. The cost wasn't a medal. Ratjen never had one to lose. The cost was decades lived under suspicion, a name turned into a punchline in sports trivia, a life story reduced to a headline in outlets that never once asked who made the decision to put a teenager on that runway. You don't hear this version because the tidy version is easier. It has a villain who isn't a federation. It has an ending. The real story doesn't end. It just goes quiet, filed away in an archive nobody thinks to open, sitting there for 90 years. So here's what's still buried. Nobody has ever released the full file from that 1938 examination. Who signed it? Who ordered it? Whether Ratjen ever consented to any part of it? The federation that made the decision was never made to answer for it, not then, not now. Somewhere that paperwork still exists. The question is who's still making sure you never see it.